stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes of action-packed excitement. All kinds of exciting things will happen. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff that's happening all this hour. Motorsports Unlimited, 60 minutes of non-stop action. So let's go to the studio right now, huh?
Thanks, Jerry, and hi, everybody. Welcome to the studio headquarters of Chicagoland's most watched, most talked about Access television series. I'm Bill Wildt, and this is the 1401st edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Today I'm going to try to explain my lengthy absence, lack of new programs, and the reason you've had to look at the same show for many weeks. Where to start? I guess I should start at the beginning. Many of you know I've had back trouble for years. Perhaps 7 or 8 years ago, I had lower back surgery. I believe the neurosurgeon just trimmed a bulging disc. It helped tremendously, but as I recall at the time, the neurosurgeon saying, "You'll be back. There's more work that needs to be done." I sort of wish I'd paid more attention at the time, but after a few months, my back was feeling much better, and I didn't want to rock the boat. A few years ago, another neurosurgeon discovered I had compressed discs in my neck, along with a potential problem called stenosis. Basically, stenosis refers to a hole that is closing. In this case, 3 or 4 of the vertebrae in my neck were closing up and squeezing my spinal cord. It was pretty obvious in the MRI. Interesting enough, while it's considered back surgery, they do it from the front. That's right, they cut your throat in order to get at the discs and vertebrae from the front. I'm learning now why that's important, and I'll explain it in a few minutes. I asked the neurosurgeon how they fixed the stenosis problem, and he explained the vertebrae are like donuts stacked on top of each other with the discs in between. After they removed the discs, they cut the vertebrae so they are U-shaped instead of donuts. In any event, as gory as it sounds, everything went well and recovery time was short. A couple of years ago, I began having trouble with my back again. But this time it was different. The problem before was sciatica. This was different. The pain wasn't in the same area, and over the period of a year became focused on my lower back down to the back of my knees, and it stopped there, unlike the sciatica, which continued down to my big toe. What was particularly interesting was it was taking my legs out from underneath me. Little by little, it got worse and worse until I couldn't walk more than 10 or 15 minutes without having to lay down. Some of you who attend the car shows we cover might remember during the last part of 2014, the guys were dragging a chair around for me to sit down on between interviews. It helped for a while, but soon I was becoming aware. If I continued to get worse, I wouldn't be able to walk anymore. That's right. The piece you just watched was taped last week. Part of the problem I'm having is fatigue. Even something as simple as that wears me out. First, I have to write the piece. That alone was almost more than my back could take. Then John Platania and I went to the studio to set up for taping what I had in mind. After setup was complete, we had to tape it. Again, hard on my back. I'm getting ahead of myself a little because you don't know what I'm talking about yet, but I'm determined to get something on the air explaining what's going on, even if I have to tape it a sentence at a time. Anyway, by the end of 2014, I was aware if I got any worse, I wouldn't be able to tape shows anymore. I didn't know what was wrong. Could it just be old age? At 72 years old, it was a possibility. Beyond that, I had another problem. Some of you might remember I had a pacemaker installed a couple of years ago. One of the downsides of a pacemaker is you can no longer have an MRI. I was pretty sure this problem was going to require an MRI. By the end of February 2015, I was sure my back needed surgical work. In fact, it was getting worse. The first car show we were going to cover in 2015 was the Jc Whitney Show in LaSalle, Illinois. The Jc Whitney Show has become the show that opens the outdoor summer car show season in the Chicagoland area. It was even more important this year because it was celebrating Jc Whitney's 100th anniversary. After covering their annual car show for a couple of decades, I sure didn't want to miss this one that celebrated 100 years of being the major source of auto parts, first in the Chicagoland area and eventually worldwide. It was important. Yet, I knew by the end of February, if it were held tomorrow, I wouldn't physically be able to do it. I had a couple of months, so I still had time. I made an appointment with my neurosurgeon. My neurosurgeon operates out of Resurrection Hospital in Chicago, but Gottlieb Hospital in Melrose Park is much closer to my home. I stopped there to find out if they saved any of the many MRIs they've done for me over the years. Sure enough, they had one of my lower back taken in 2013, and they were able to provide me with a copy. I checked with my neurosurgeon, and he said it was worth taking a look at. The problem with seeing neurosurgeons is they are the very top of the medical food chain. And my neurosurgeon, Dr. Yampour, and his partner, Dr. Yang, have a national reputation as being among the very best. The point is, the earliest appointment I could get was 6 weeks away. I was starting to worry about the Jc Whitney Show. I still had time, but it was getting close. When I sat down with Dr. Yampour in his office, he booted up the MRI, took one look, and said something like, "Oh no, look at this." I said, "What do you mean, look at this? I don't know what I'm looking at." Fortunately, Dr. Yampour doesn't mind explaining things, and frankly, once you know what you're looking at, it doesn't take a neurosurgeon to see what was wrong. One of the lower discs was completely gone. The one above it was halfway hanging out, as was the one below it. My first reaction was, how could a disc be missing? Where could it go? He explained I had degenerative disc disease and that the disc was absorbed into my body. I've had bulging discs before, so I knew the ones hanging out were bad. The only thing I could think of was, can you fix it? He looked at the screen again and said in a somewhat hesitant manner, "Yes, but it isn't easy." I wish I'd paid more attention to the "it isn't easy" part. All I heard was yes. He asked me when I wanted to do it, and I told him this afternoon. "Not so fast, Bill. You're a heart patient. First, we have to get clearance for surgery from your cardiologist. After that, we need clearance from your primary care doctor. Then we have to secure an operating room, and I have to check with my partner's schedule." I could see he was thinking. All I was thinking about was the Jc Whitney Show. As soon as I got home, I started making calls to my cardiologist and primary care doctor. You know him, Dr. Joe Sadowski, the Toys for Tots motorcycle parade doctor. It wasn't easy. Both doctors had to sort of squeeze me in, and my cardiologist insisted on a stress test because of the kind of surgery I was going to have. I really should have paid attention when he started questioning that. But I was worried about the Jc Whitney Show and if I was going to make it. I had to first get the required clearances taken care of, then surgery. As luck would have it, the surgery was scheduled for April 10th, 2015, assuming I had the clearances. When I had the clearances in hand and surgery was only a couple of days away, I noticed I was getting sick. Damn, I thought, if it isn't one thing, it's another. But there was no question about it. I was very congested and it was getting worse. I tried anyway. I went to Resurrection Hospital at the appropriate time, got into the hospital gown, and hoped the doctor wouldn't notice the congestion, or maybe it wouldn't make a difference anyway. I was ready, the operating room was ready, the doctor arrived as soon as we exchanged good mornings. He looked at me and said, "You're sick." He listened to my lungs and wasn't happy. He went through the extra effort of finding an anesthesiologist to listen to my breathing. The anesthesiologist just shook his head and said, "No way." The surgery was rescheduled for April 29. I was still thinking about the Jc Whitney Show. Let's see. Surgery April 29, Jc Whitney May 3rd. That's 5 days. There was a possibility, but it wasn't going to be easy. Still, I told Toby, the retail store manager for Jc Whitney, I couldn't make any promises, but I'd try hard to be there. I had another problem too. Some of you may remember I lost one of my longtime best friends a year and a half ago. If Don French were still with us, he passed away. All I would have had to do was say, "Don, can you load up the video equipment and meet me at Jc Whitney in LaSalle?" And it would have been taken care of. Don and I had been friends for a long time. He knew where everything was and was as careful as I am. Without him, things were even more difficult, to say the least. We all continue to miss our dear friend. As a matter of fact, I was continually reminded of Don during this episode in my life. Certainly, if he were still with us, he would have driven me to the hospital for the surgery. I thought about this as I approached the hospital in my car April 29th, 2015. Where should I park? I wondered. Without Don, I would have to park close enough to the hospital so I could get to my car afterwards. Not to mention, I really couldn't walk that far going in. It turned out that the emergency room parking lot was close to the entrance. I picked a place that was sort of obscure so they wouldn't tow my car. The parking lot was quite large, so I was sure the car wouldn't be noticed for 2 or 3 days. I parked, went inside, and signed in. The congestion was gone. I was feeling fine. Once again, I was in the hospital gown, sitting on the bed, waiting for the doctor, more than a little nervous. I'm terrified of shots, and I knew that was the first step. Just then I heard, "Good morning, Bill. How's the congestion?" It was Dr. Yampour, my neurosurgeon. "I think I'm fine now, doctor. It's time to get this over with." I remember you don't like shots, so I've got the very best guy in the country. I knew it was BS, but it made me feel good that he remembered. By now, I was on the gurney. We were in the operating room, and a female face, albeit with a surgical mask covering her beautiful face, said, "Do you remember me, Bill?" It was Dr. Yampour's gorgeous girlfriend, and then I remembered she was his surgical nurse. Just about that time, I figured out they were distracting me so I wouldn't notice the needle. What a nice thing to do, I was thinking, but I was drifting off. I was out. I would learn later, Doctors Yampour and Yang worked on me for 9 hours. Of course, I was out. Fortunately, I missed the whole thing. I don't exactly remember when I woke up. It seemed to me I was going in and out. Sleep for a few hours, then wake up for 15 minutes, then go back to sleep again, in and out for what seemed like a couple of days, maybe 3. I really don't know. I do know that when I was awake, the pain was excruciating and weird. The pain was like lightning bolts, and regardless of how hard I tried, I couldn't get up. I can't really tell you how long I was out, but little by little, I stayed awake longer and longer and slept less. I was absolutely amazed by how physically weak I was. I mean, it wasn't like I was gone for 6 months or something. It was only a few days as near as I could make out. Even trying to get to the bathroom was exhausting. First, I had to get someone from the hospital staff to help me with the walker. Then I had to struggle from the bed to my feet. Then struggle with the walker from my bed to the bathroom, perhaps 10 feet. By the time I got back to my bed, I was exhausted and had to sleep, sometimes 3 or 4 hours. I was puzzled by it and determined to ask the doctor what was going on. This was one of the few questions I remembered long enough to actually ask the doctor when I saw him. I was told, "Bill, your body has sustained horrendous damage from the surgery. At least your body sees it as damage. It is using all of its resources to mend what it sees as damage. There is only a small amount of energy left for tasks like going to the bathroom." He told me to use the bedpan. Of course, I wanted no part of that. A few days later, I had to give in. I just didn't have the energy to get to the bathroom. I had to surrender to the bedpan. It was the first time in my life and humiliating, but I really had no choice. I would have hidden under the covers if I could have, but all I could do was lay there. I don't really remember most of what happened in this area called rehab. In fact, I was having trouble remembering questions I wanted to ask the doctor. After a couple of weeks, I finally remembered I wanted to ask the doctor why I couldn't remember anything. He said, "Bill, you were under anesthesia for 9 hours. It will take quite a while until it's all out of your body. Be patient." I'll be the first to admit I am not a patient man, or a good patient for that matter. I was miserable and I wanted out. The only thing was, I couldn't get up. I could see by the chart on the wall they scheduled me to leave 3 weeks after the surgery. I could see on my cell phone 2 weeks had gone by. I resigned myself to being ready to leave when it was time. They were providing a therapist 2 times a day, and I forced myself to do more repetitions than required, even though it hurt and was exhausting. I was not a happy camper there. I can't explain why. The place was nice enough. The people were nice enough. I guess it was the idea of feeling confined. No, I wasn't exactly confined, but I couldn't really get up at will. First of all, I couldn't physically get up. By now, I'd been told they removed 4 discs from my lower back. The intention is to end up with 5 lower back vertebrae fused together. It's called a multi-level fusion, if I remember correctly. But this would take time. Bone doesn't grow that quickly. In the meantime, it was important that I not stress the area. They had a band on my wrist indicating fall risk. If I managed to get one leg over the side of the bed, an alarm went off alerting the staff, and they came running. I understood the need for it, but I didn't like it. I wanted to make sure I'd be ready to go when they said I could go. Frankly, I'm sure they were as happy to see me go as I was to be going. As the departure date grew closer, all of a sudden my car occurred to me. Damn, I thought. I wonder if it's still there. When I parked it, I thought it would only be there for a couple of days, maybe 3. Now it was approaching 3 weeks. I started looking for my car keys when returning from the therapy with my therapist. He wondered what I was looking for. I told him, my car keys. They're not where I remembered leaving them. Although I wasn't surprised, I wasn't remembering anything. When the day came to leave, I called John Platania to pick me up. When he got there, he asked me about what I was going to do with my car. Is it still out there, I asked? He says, yes, I parked right next to it. I was relieved. If my memory was functioning properly, I would have been worried. I'm not worried about the car right now, John. I can't find my keys anyway. John was alarmed about my keys and wanted to start a search. I told him not to worry about them. I just wanted to get out of here. Actually, I was pretty sure the staff had hidden them, and I didn't want to raise hell about it and lose my chances to get out. In addition, there was no way that I could drive anyway. I was in serious pain, and the fatigue problem was on my mind. I sure didn't want to fall asleep driving. Even a little fender bender could be a disaster. I should mention my imagination while I was in this place was running wild. I think I mentioned the band on my wrist. Fall risk. That was all my imagination needed to conjure up thoughts along the lines of I was being marked for medical experiments or organ harvest. You have to remember, I was on serious pain medication. They can't take 6 inches out of your spine without serious pain management. Not enough in my mind, but considering my thought process, I think they got it about right. While I was in rehab, Don French's widow, came to visit me. I guess I mentioned my concerns about the wristband, and she gently said, Bill, that's not why they do that. It's because the type of surgery you had makes it possible for you to be paralyzed if you should fall. It's very important that everyone knows this. I know Darlene isn't a doctor, but for some reason her words stuck with me. What she said made sense, and I was relieved. Almost as relieved as when John wheeled me out of the place and to his car. I can't tell you how happy I was when John pulled me up in front of my house. I was desperate to see my dog Tiny, and, frankly, once again, I was reminded of the words of John Howard Payne's poem, "Mid pleasures and palaces, though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home." When I got home, I had every intention of checking my email, but the ordeal of getting home, getting up the front steps with my confounded walker, was exhausting, and I fell asleep almost immediately. The first couple of days at home were strange. When I knew I was coming home, I contacted May. You remember May. She was the Asian girl who was on Motorsports Unlimited for some time. She too lives alone, but on the lakefront in Chicago. I hoped she would take a train to my home and help me for a couple of weeks. Fortunately, she agreed. Apparently, when she got to my home, she contacted my neighbor. Or maybe I called him. I really don't remember. Either way, they decided to rearrange the house so I could get a walker through. My neighbor is a terrific guy. I'll never be able to repay him. These two were way ahead of me. I really didn't have a plan. I just wanted to go home. I wasn't even thinking about the walker. As it would turn out, it was a somewhat flawed plan or non-plan. First of all, when you can barely get up, even a glass of water can be a chore. Water would be the least of my concerns. I had to eat too. As one who has lived alone for a long time and doesn't cook, I'm accustomed to the habit of eating at fast food places. Somehow, fast food places seemed like they were miles away instead of blocks. May picked up a bunch of TV dinners and showed me how to make them so I could do it when I was able to get up. John Platania found a tray that clamped onto my walker so I was able to carry something like a completed TV dinner from the kitchen to the dining room. There is a surprising amount that goes into day-to-day living that we normally take for granted. On my second day home, I found out how important it was to have someone else there. I guess I sort of thought I could stock up on plenty of food and drink and tough it out until I got stronger. I went to sleep normally on the second night. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. My bed is only about 8 feet from the bathroom door, and I figured I could make it without waking May. I managed to stand up using the walker and started shuffling my way the few feet to the bathroom. It was going all right, but as I pushed through the door frame going into the adjoining room where May was sleeping, it sounds complicated, but it's just a doorway into a small bedroom, but you don't go into the bedroom, you turn left and go through the bathroom door. Anyway, as I pushed the walker through the first doorway, the right forward leg of the walker hooked on the door frame. Unfortunately, it was 3 a.m. and I was half asleep, not to mention loaded up on pain medication. In other words, my judgment and reflexes were less than sharp. I remember not being able to pull back as I was leaning forward with the walker. I also recall, as I began tipping forward, that my right leg was pawing the air like a trick horse trying to show the audience he could count. I was going down, but my right leg couldn't find the floor for some reason. It just kept pawing air. About that time, the tumbling walker contacted the metal frame on May's bed. As I began crashing to the floor, I heard May scream. I must have looked like a huge monster falling toward her. Fortunately, I was twisting right with the walker hooked on the door frame, so I didn't land on her. I ended up in a pile that included the walker sort of on the bottom and me trapped in it. May was screaming, trying to figure out what was going on. She'd been sound asleep. I was laying in the twisted pile taking stock, remembering my motorcycle racing days when we would try to go into a death slide, as we laughingly called flipping down the straightaway like a rag doll and trying to stabilize the tumbling by sliding. Death slide, get it? Anyway, then taking stock of what might be broken when we stopped. First, we would straighten one leg, and if no pain could be felt, we would straighten the other, then the right arm, then the left, trying to see if we had a chance to make the restart. In much the same way, I went through the old checklist. Odd how these things come back to you when you're laying in a pile of twisted walker, which could have easily been twisted motorcycle in my mind that was on plenty of pain medication and wondering if the medication is keeping me from feeling the pain. Anyway, everything seemed okay, except I couldn't get up. I tried, but I couldn't get up. I'm a pretty stubborn guy and I tried hard, but I couldn't get up. My struggling was getting me wedged in further. While it's true I lost 30 pounds during the 3 weeks in the hospital, I still weighed 208 pounds, and there was no way little May could help me. The main problem was I was stuck. There was only about 20 inches between the bed and that May was in and the door, which had been forced over center during the crash, or fall if you prefer. I was really wedged in and couldn't get out. Worse, I was rapidly getting weaker. Once again, it was that weird recovery feature of small amounts of energy used equal immediate fatigue. I knew it wouldn't be long and I wouldn't be able to move at all. Worse, I'd probably be sleeping. Then I remembered the cell phone on the stand next to my bed. May, can you get me the cell phone? She looked where I was pointing and retrieved the phone. She was coming out of a deep sleep and it wasn't easy for her either. A quick call to 911 had the paramedics on the way. As soon as they arrived, I explained the situation as fast as I could. I was really concerned about the fatigue problem, and if too much time elapsed, I knew I'd be out. This fatigue part of the recovery from serious surgery is very weird. As was explained to me, my body is using all of its resources to mend what it sees as the damaged parts of my body. There is little resource left for other tasks, but I've got to tell you, the shutoff of diversion of resources is quick and complete. When my body needed sleep, it just did it. While I don't remember it, John Platania told me one of the times he came to visit me in the hospital, I told him to go. He was only there for a few minutes, and I told him to go home, and then immediately went to sleep. John is my good friend, and I'm always glad to see him. It's an example of how powerful the body's need for rest can be. I was concerned I wouldn't be able to explain the situation to the paramedics if I didn't spit it out quickly. I've had 3 personal experiences with paramedics in my life, and on every occasion I was truly impressed. These guys are dedicated, smart, and genuinely give a damn. Once they understood the situation, I was surprised at how quickly they came up with a workable plan. It wasn't that they weren't big enough or strong enough to pull me up. They were plenty big and plenty strong. there just wasn't any room. Plus the fact that I'd explained the back surgery I was recovering from, and they didn't want to add to the problem. They approached the situation exactly the way I like to think I would have. They carefully worked a blanket around my back and then spread it out to distribute my weight as evenly as possible. It wasn't easy, as my weight had settled onto parts of the walker and they were trying not to hurt me. They worked quickly and carefully, and after working the blanket around me and spreading it out, the biggest guy stood in the bathroom doorway, held onto both parts of the blanket while simultaneously placing his boot under my feet and pulling me up with the blanket. In the meantime, two other guys were supporting, one on each side, as they were able to extract me from between the door and the bed frame. I wasn't able to help much because fatigue set in, and I couldn't even straighten up once they extracted me and were supporting me, providing me with support. They were able to kind of half guide and half carry me back to my bed, in which I immediately rolled into my original position. The only problem was they really wanted to take me to the hospital. This was a tough argument for me because I was on a lot of pain medication, wasn't really thinking straight, and they were right. In a perfect world, I should have gone to the hospital. The problem is, as I saw it, was that they wanted to take me to Gottlieb. And while I love Gottlieb, after all, they did perform a quadruple bypass on me, saving my life some years ago. The fact is the back surgery was done at Resurrection, and the visiting nurse from Resurrection was coming in about 3 hours. It seemed to me going to Gottlieb would have been endless hours of paperwork only to then be turned over to Resurrection. I knew the paramedics were right about having a hospital check me out, but it just didn't seem practical. I've said it before on Motorsports Unlimited. The tax money spent on paramedics is money well spent. They do a terrific job, and I have yet to meet one who wasn't totally dedicated. I think they were actually a little mad at me for not letting them take me to the hospital. As I said earlier, they give a damn. Apparently, there were no ill effects from my fall, but it could have been bad. The next day, while it was still fresh in my mind, I went over it. I am not a careless person, and it isn't like me to fall. I think it was a combination of being half asleep, loaded up on the necessary pain medication, and the weird fatigue following energy usage. I think more than anything it was the latter. When the walker hooked the door frame, I should have been able to maneuver the walker to avoid the fall. The problem was my strength was gone from the small journey from my bed to the door frame. I tested it the next day when I was fresh without difficulty. I tucked the information away in the recesses of my mind and went to sleep again. I doubled my efforts about being careful, and in a couple of weeks I decided to try the computer again. I tried it after I was home for a few days, but was somewhat confounded by how to use it. I had trouble booting it up, and somehow my hand-mind coordination with the mouse was off. I couldn't select what I wanted to select, and when I did, I couldn't hold the mouse steady long enough to click. It was very strange. I spent a lot of time on the computer, and it's second nature to me. Worse, in a few minutes I was exhausted, and the problems I was having got worse. I at least wanted to send an email to the cable companies to let them know what had happened to me. Remember, my expectation when I went to the hospital was 2 or 3 days in the hospital and a week at home, then back in action. I had no idea I'd be out of service this long. Try as I might, I could not compose a simple email to let these folks know. I finally had to give up and go to sleep again. My inability to use the computer bothered me so much, I finally contacted a friend of a friend who happened to be an anesthesiologist to find out if the anesthesia could still be affecting me. As it turned out, he didn't think so. However, there are a variety of possible concoctions that anesthesiologists used for surgery, so one would have to know exactly what was used to be sure. On the other hand, when he heard about the surgery I had, he asked me about other medication I was taking. He indicated the surgery was very serious, and after hearing what I was taking said, "You're probably feeling the effects of the painkillers, but don't stop taking them. That surgery is pretty rough. You have to expect to be off your normal game for a while." Okay. I'd been blaming the anesthesia lingering in my body for kind of screwing me up. As it turns out, it's probably the medication. Either way, I had to live with it. The hole the neurosurgeons cut in my back was pretty scary, and I'm pretty sure I don't want to feel what it would be like without medication. After being home for 5 or 6 weeks, I started feeling a little better and noticed my concentration was improving. I began responding to emails and letting people know what was going on. Of course, by this time, I was well aware that I'd missed the Jc Whitney Show. In addition, I missed the Bill K. Corvette Show and the North Lake Days Show. Worse, I still wasn't in any shape to be producing programming. I decided to start going to the studio and creating a program explaining what happened. And that's what you're looking at. Once again, I expected it to take a week or two, and here I am 5 weeks later, still working on it. There are so many strange things about this episode in my life, I'm having a tough time getting it all down on paper. Everything about it has been strange, even the pain. Sometimes it's like a lightning bolt, and sometimes it's like a sore back, and sometimes it's both, and sometimes it's a pain in my leg, and sometimes it's a pain in my back, and sometimes it feels like it's gone, then it's back. It's even difficult to explain to the doctors. Yes, one expects to be laid up for a time after back surgery, but this is beyond anything I've ever heard of, let alone experienced. I must say, once I understood what the neurosurgeons had done, my admiration grew exponentially. Talk about people who haven't wasted their lives. These guys literally save lives or make life worth living for others every week of their lives. What they did for me takes enormous skill, talent, and knowledge. What a waste it would have been if they decided to be lawyers or stockbrokers. I can't even imagine what the thought process one would go through to decide to pursue being a neurosurgeon. But I'm sure glad some of the best and brightest have done so. They make a difference for all of us. Speaking of making a difference, I was surprised to learn of all of the help available. I'm guessing for senior citizens, but I'm not really sure. When I returned home from the hospital, I began receiving calls almost immediately telling me a visiting nurse would be coming at regular intervals, that a therapist would be making regular visits to help me keep up with the all-important exercises. Of course, I was a little suspicious that it might be some sort of scam. After all, I hadn't called anybody or applied for anything, but somehow they knew about me, a 72-year-old man who lives alone and had disabling surgery. I thought it was odd that they would know that. I was aware I wasn't as sharp as I should be, so I made sure I didn't sign anything. Surprisingly, it was all on the up and up and very helpful. As one who has lived alone for a long time, I quickly became aware that my plan to sit in the middle of the living room floor, equipped with a supply of food and water, wasn't going to work. Day-to-day life requires a lot of maintenance. I learned that the visiting nurse was from arrangements made by Dr. Sadowski, or Doc Joe as we call him, and Dr. Yampur, the neurosurgeon, and Dr. Pasquale, a doctor at Resurrection. In addition, they notified an organization called Presence Home Care and Aging Care Connections. One of the organizations provided the visiting therapist. It turns out that the most important regular visitor was the cleaning girl. That's right. The Aging Care Connection actually provided a regular cleaning girl so I wouldn't have to die in my own filth. I can imagine the conversation went something like this. We have a grumpy old man who lives alone and can't bend over. If we tell him about all this, he probably won't cooperate, so just do it. The cleaning girl turned out to be an unbelievably important person because before the surgery, I haven't been able to bend over for a couple of years, and following the surgery, I was cautioned about bending over more than anything else. The vertebrae in my back, surrounded by the spacers, or cages, as I believe the neurosurgeon called them, have to grow bone between each other and through the spacers. If I bend the area in the spine or twist it, the process is damaged and I have to start over. I'm sure I don't have to tell those of you who keep house out there how bad my place was after 3 years of not being able to bend over. I can't tell you how much I appreciate and value this service. At first, I didn't think it would be a big deal to me because I'm not exactly Mr. Neat. As it turns out, the place being clean made me feel better. There is a safety side to it too. One night, while trying to take my pills, and there are plenty of them, I dropped the pill bottle. It rolled under the bed and I couldn't reach it. I tried a broom handle, I tried a towel, I just couldn't reach it. Then I remembered the cleaning girl was coming the next day. Sure enough, after she arrived, I asked her if she could reach it. It was no problem for her. I guess we never really appreciate our capabilities until we lose them. There is no question I was wrong about being able to handle everything myself. I tend to think I can do anything, and to some degree it's true. However, when one is physically incapacitated, all that goes out the window. When the visiting nurse and then the therapist and then the cleaning girl showed up, I didn't know where they were coming from. I'd never heard of anything like this. But I'm sure glad they came. I was way over my head trying to do it on my own. Apparently, my doctors knew it and were way ahead of me. Actually, even the nurses at the hospital were looking out for me. I think I mentioned I couldn't find my car keys when I was leaving the hospital, and I suspected the staff hid them. About an hour after I got home, I received a call from them saying they found the keys. I was sure then that they must have hidden them to keep me from trying to drive home. I wasn't angry. I thought it was a thoughtful thing to do. I was in no condition to drive, and I knew it. But they didn't know I knew I couldn't drive. They were protecting me from myself. I was pleased that they cared. As I said earlier, I am not a good patient, and I wouldn't blame them for being glad to get rid of me. Of course, just as important as the medical people were my friends and neighbors. Without them, I couldn't have gotten this far. Of particular concern to me was my dog. She needed to be fed and walked a couple of times a day, and my next door neighbor Carlos took care of it for weeks. I'll never be able to repay him for everything he did. May doesn't drive, so when she was looking after me, Carlos took her everywhere. So, here I am, about 3 months after surgery, that I thought would be a couple of days in the hospital and a week at home and back in action. This has been a complete surprise. I just returned from an appointment with Dr. Yampur, the neurosurgeon, and I asked him point blank, how much time until I'm 100% completely healed? I was stunned to hear 7 to 9 months. I couldn't believe it. Months! I'm sure I can beat that time, but I'm always sure of that, and somehow, in this case, I haven't beaten anything. For those waiting for new programming, all I can say is I'll do the best I can. For those who don't know, we once went 14 years without a rerun. We were very proud of it. You have to remember, Motorsports Unlimited is not a simple talking heads show where people come into the studio, sit down, and chat. Every show features both location and studio footage. Because of this, it is a complicated show to edit, requiring some 40 to 60 hours of editing per episode. From the beginning, we realized those we compete with for attention, meaning NBC, ABC, CBS, can do everything better than we can. Better cameras, better lighting, better writing, better talent, better everything. We felt the only chance we had to compete was always providing new programming. So while they are airing reruns, perhaps we could get folks to try watching us. The point is, we worked very hard to get an audience. Allowing the same shows to air week after week is like a dagger in the heart to us, but there really isn't anything I can do about it. Actually, it happened once before. About a dozen years ago, I had a heart attack and a quadruple bypass. This too put us on hold for a couple of months. I am hopeful our operation will be up and running again shortly. I prepared this program to keep loyal viewers informed about what was going on and offer my apologies to those who have emailed trying to find out what was going on. I sure hope at the end of all this, I will be walking normally and seeing you at the local car shows. Ah yes, the outdoor summer car shows. As I type this, I've already missed the 2015 100th anniversary Jc Whitney Show, the Bill K. Corvette Show, the North Lake Days Show, the Franklin Park Car Show, and the Willow Springs Car Show. I'm starting to wonder if I'll cover any of the 2015 outdoor summer car shows. All of these events have become regular fare on Motorsports Unlimited, and I can't believe I missed them. All I can tell you is, if there were any way of doing them, I would have made it happen. I'm not one who gives up easily. Sometimes at my own peril. I can't tell you how many times I got up after a hard crash while racing motorcycles and made the restart. I suppose I should probably explain the crash rules of professional motorcycle racing. If you go down and they have to flag the race, you have 10 minutes to make the restart. If you don't make the restart because you're hurt, they won't give you your professional license back until you get a release from your doctor. Of course, nobody wants to go through all that because many of us were racing 4 and 5 nights a week. We sure couldn't afford to miss any races given the way the point system worked. Like everyone else, I had a number of hard get-offs, but I never failed to make the restart. Except the last one, when I suffered a compound fracture of the tibia and fibula of my right leg. For those who don't know, that means both bones in my lower leg, and they were sticking through the skin. That's what the compound means. Matter of fact, my leg was completely broken off at a 90-degree angle. There was no way anyone could have made the restart. Worse, I missed the remainder of the season. I raced motorcycle flat track for 5 years and was proud of my record, but there is no question I made restarts I shouldn't have. At 72 years old, I now know how much additional damage can be done by toughing it out in order to make the restart. I remember one particularly hard get-off I had at a small central Illinois dirt track. My back hurt so bad I could barely walk, but I made the restart, ran the race, even picked up a few points, and strained at the pay window to keep a straight face. I can't help but wonder now if that was the beginning of the mystery of the completely missing disc. When you're young, it's just a matter of showing your friends and yourself how tough you are. Now, I know how risky it was. I'm telling this story to caution today's young guys, even though I know they won't listen. I didn't. I vividly remember after seeing me hobble around one time, my dad telling me, "Son, one of these days you're going to pay for all this." I loved and respected my dad, but I didn't think there was any possible way he could understand what was at stake. Now I know it was me who didn't understand what was at stake. In any event, my point is, if there was any possible way I could have shot these car shows, I would have. But the fact is, the risk is too high. Now that I understand, sort of, what was done, I sure didn't want to take a chance of screwing it up. Frankly, at 72, I might not heal again. Among other things, I can't bend over until the bone growth is complete. Waiting for bone to grow is like watching grass grow, except worse. At least you can see grass growing. The only way I know if there is bone growth is to go to the hospital, get a CT scan, and take it to the neurosurgeon so he can read it. Somewhere back in the 16th century, someone said, "All of man's troubles begin with his inability to sit in a darkened room and do nothing." How true it is. Sitting, watching the clock for hours is like torture. You can look around and see how much work there is to do, and you can't do any of it for fear of damaging the unbelievably slow progress of bone growth. This is not an unfounded fear, as many have played tough guy and stressed their back, causing damage and requiring surgery again. Thinking of what I've been through keeps me very careful. I sure don't want to do it again. I have an appointment with Dr. Yampur August 27, 2015, to show him the latest CT scan, and I'm hoping he tells me I have impressive bone growth. By the way, I suppose I should tell you, I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. I'm passing on this experience in hopes that the story might help someone else avoid serious or injury or re-injury. As I understand it, the 4 discs removed from my lower back were replaced with what looks like spacers. I think Dr. Yapur called them cages. I don't know why. They don't look like cages to me. They look like spacers. Hey, I told you I'm not a doctor. Anyway, the idea is the spacers hold the 5 vertebrae apart while the bone begins to grow from the vertebrae through the spacers and to each other. While this is going on, you can't move any of these pieces or risk breaking the joint. The idea is, as I understand it, the 5 vertebrae should end up being one piece. All the bone kind of grows them all together. I suppose this will limit my flexibility somewhat, but it's much better than not walking. Oh, one more thing before I forget again. I mentioned earlier in the show that when Dr. Yampur operated on my neck through my throat, this was a few years ago, in other words, he cut my throat, there was a reason for it, and I'd better explain as promised. He could have gone through my back, but the back is a much more heavily muscled area and the recovery time is much longer. The muscles and nerves in the area all have to grow back together after being cut. The throat is mostly fleshy tissue, and the entrance wound heals much more quickly. I don't think I appreciated it at the time, but now that I'm going through serious recovery, including the wild lightning bolt pain, I understand his nerve pain. I see why he did my neck from the front. Fortunately, I have great confidence in Dr. Yapur and took his word for it. Okay, I think I've covered everything except the future. Frankly, I don't know. If the estimate of 7 to 9 months recovery holds up, I'll probably miss all of the summer 2015 shows. A good guess might be I'll physically be ready to shoot for our annual Gathering at the Rock Thanksgiving morning. Perhaps I can beat that by a little bit, but I'm not going to take any chances. The drama I suffered, like being shocked at how long I was in the hospital and surprised at the pain and discomfort, and it was because I didn't listen carefully enough. It's not that the doctors didn't tell me. It's just that sometimes I only hear what I want to hear. The doctors were great, and as soon as the doctors tell me I'm good to go, I'll get things rolling again. I've learned to listen. I want to close today's show with a closing comment, but first, let's enjoy a couple of clips from previous car shows. Well, I think the sun is really trying now, although I'm feeling raindrops again. It really is making us crazy today. But how can you walk past something like this? What an absolutely gorgeous, eye-catching piece. First of all, you are?
Larry Hested from Geneva, Illinois.
Okay, and tell us about your truck and start with the make, year, and model.
It's a 1936 Ford. Cab has been stretched 7 inches.
Now, how did you stretch the cab 7 inches? Did you add the window?
This has been added. I didn't do the work, but yes, everything behind the door has been
So it was not a 5-window originally?
Oh, no. No,
Wow.
They didn't make any.
Wow, they did a ton of work on that.
Yeah, they did.
Go ahead, I didn't mean to stop you.
That's okay. That's it.
Oh, no, come on.
350
Engine
Chevy,
okay.
350 Chevy, Mustang 2 front end, Thunderbird independent rear end.
You got an independent rear suspension?
Yes.
Somebody went through a lot of effort. That's and really worth the effort. Can you comment on it?
Drives really nice.
You know, I talk to people all the time, and they're sick of hearing me saying all the guys, particularly with T-Roadsters, they're such light vehicles, and that big banjo you're hanging in the back, the sprung to unsprung weight ratio is awful. Knock the heck out of you going over the railroad tracks, and I just think the effort of putting in an independent rear suspension, especially on these light street rides, is really worth the effort.
Yeah, it really does drive and ride pretty nice.
Right, the handling and ride is always much better. How about transmission?
It's got a turbo 400.
Okay, and did you do any of the work?
I've only had it about a year.
Okay.
It was built up in Minnesota 7 or 8 years ago, and I bought it from a gentleman up there.
What provokes you then if you're not a builder and you're not? I'm guessing you're not one of the guys like me that spent his childhood in the garage doing engine swaps and things. Then what provokes you to want something like this?
I've always been interested in cars. I've had a couple of I'm in pickups. I've had several pickups over the years. I just don't have room or space to do a project anymore, so I kind of have to look for one that's ready to go and do some smaller jobs on it. I just put power steering on this one.
So you do some work then?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you are mechanical. And
yeah.
I'm always curious, though, when I talk to somebody that has a car that they bought, I'm always curious. This is kind of, for people like myself and John that's with me here working today, we've built cars all our lives, and we understand the interest, but I'm glad that there are people that buy them and all that. That's not my implication. But it sounds to me like you are kind of a car guy, a builder.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, okay.
Back 40 years ago, I had a 40 Ford I was working on street riding. Never got it on the street, but
that's what happens to the first and second and third projects.
Too many kids and boats and other things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell you something. How about the interior? Who did that?
That was done up in Minneapolis. I'm not sure of the shop that did it. But it's pretty nice.
Beautiful. So the thing is gorgeous. I assume it has air and all the good stuff?
It has air, power steering, power brakes.
Sounds like a nice riding, handling vehicle.
Yep, it is nice.
Okay, is there anything that I've missed that you're particularly proud of that you'd like the audience to know about?
One unique item is the headlights are they're from a Peterbilt truck.
Boy, it really works in there.
Yeah, it does.
What about the mounts, or are those handmade?
The mounts are, that's Peterbilt also.
Really? Now that works. Somebody can get an idea from that.
Yep.
That works. That's all. You know what year or anything?
I do not. I think that's off of I'm not a Peterbilt guy, but I think it's a J series Peterbilt.
Boy, that really works.
It
does. It really works.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks for spending a little time with us. By the way, the bed, the woodwork and all that, all was already done when you got it?
Yep, all done. Yep.
I'll tell you something. It's gorgeous. Thanks for spending some time with us. And
thank you.
Folks, I'm working as fast as I can here between the raindrops. I promise. Well, there's no way that someone my age can walk past an absolutely drop-dead gorgeous 426 Hemi with a drop-dead gorgeous girl with it, who apparently owns and drives the car. First of all, you are?
Diana.
Diana what?
Roulette.
And where are you from?
Schaumburg, Illinois.
Can you tell me about your car, or do I have to talk to the guy?
I think you better talk to him.
It always comes out that way. Much to my chagrin, it always comes out that way. Tell the folks who you are.
I'm Bob Fleischer.
Well, who's Jeans?
Jeans is He was the second owner of the car back in the 60s.
Okay, and where are you from?
I'm from Elmwood Park, Illinois.
Okay, please tell me, but first of all, the cars, this is another one of those things, folks, that I say it all the time on Motorsports Unlimited. You have to come to these shows in person. Don't depend on me to bring it to you, because there's no way you could appreciate the paint and color on this thing without being here in person. It is absolutely gorgeous. Tell me about it. What do we got?
We got a original factory lightweight super stock car, 65 Dodge Coronet, 426 Hemi, 4-speed. It's one of 101, number 58 of 101 original lightweight cars. They had lightweight fenders, doors, hood.
Is this the one with the aluminum front end or the
aluminum,
acid dipped?
This is the acid dipped one. Aluminum stopped in 64. And it has the lightweight windows. They're about 1/8 of an inch thick. And radio heater delete, backseat delete, all that stuff. Van seats, no sun visors, just rear view mirrors, dome lamps, all that stuff is deleted on the car. And
a 426 Hemi
and a
with dual
426
quads?
Hemi with the cross ram and dual quads, yes.
Okay. I'm probably a little older than you, so I can probably give you a little history of how this goofiness occurred, and it is goofy. It used to be when you went drag racing, and I probably did my first pass in 1957, 58 at the old Oswego drag strip.
Sure.
And they would have A stock. Now, that would indicate A stock, that would be the top stock cars. Well, okay, so if you've got a 57 Chevy and you're A stock and you've got a Fibula Chevy or something like that, and maybe Ford, you had a Paxton supercharged 312. Well, what happens the next year when all of a sudden Chevy has a 348 and Ford has a 352 in there?
Yeah.
Well, what do we call that? Oh, well, we'll call that double A stock. Okay? Well, then Chevy goes to 409s and 409s. Well, now what do we call? So we were running out of names to come up with these things. In the meantime, the factories are getting interested, and they want their cars to. So little by little, they're inching up on what could really be called a stock car.
Right.
One could hardly call this a stock division car.
Correct.
But it was.
Yes, it was, but it's not stock by any means.
It's a stock only in imagination only.
Right.
And they weren't the only ones that did it. Ford did their Thunderbolt with their
Sure.
with their mid-sized car with the fiberglass front end, and
Right.
all of them had this. And they eventually called them factory experimental cars. And I'll tell you where it went from there. People wonder about the origin, and I watched the whole thing develop. The origin of the funny car. People think it has to do with something looking funny, like ha-ha. No, it's funny peculiar, because what they would do is take a car like this, and they would move the rear axle forward 15 or 16 inches
Right.
to get more weight on the rear wheels, and then they would do the body panels so they looked stock, but that car looks kind of funny to me,
Right.
meaning peculiar. Then they actually took and sliced the cars down the middle and narrowed them 5 inches. Now they still look the same, but now they really do look funny, and that's where people don't realize the origin of the word funny car is funny peculiar, not funny ha ha.
Right.
You don't look old enough to
Oh, yeah.
remember all that.
Definitely.
Definitely? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But this one is an exquisite car. I just, how much of it is still stock from the factory?
It's pretty much all here except for the engine and transmission, because it was a race car all its life. And,
Probably had lots of different Hemis in there.
So it's had a few different Hemis in it, but it's a 68 block, but it's built a little bit hotter than the original Hemi, 13-to-1 pistons, a big crane roller cam, and the original cross ram. It has the original cross ram,
Still a
magnesium
426?
cross ram, still a 426. It has the original rear end that I changed the pumpkin on to lower gear for the street. Still has the lightweight doors, fenders.
Oh, wait, you don't drive this in the street.
Yeah, I drove it here. I drive it on the street. Yes, I do. It was built to drive.
Yes, I know. Seriously, you didn't trailer it here?
No, I drove it here.
He drove it.
Do you run it at all?
No, too valuable.
Most important question. Do you drive it?
No.
What? Why not? Do you know how to drive stick shift?
Oh, I do. I had a
Well-
stick all my life.
Well,
It's too powerful for me.
yeah,
I'd have to have a remote control shut off if she drove it.
Yeah, well, I guess. No, in fact, let me give you a little secret. Don't lean against that fender too hard. You'll be sorry. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
They are not strong at all. You can bend them very, very easily.
Yeah.
Anyhow, is there anything we've missed on your car that you think the audience would be interested in knowing that I failed to ask?
No, it's a original East Coast car, so it has a lot of history. It raced against a lot of the popular cars in the day, match race.
Okay.
Match race. I have a picture of it match racing Grumpy Jenkins, original Plymouth in '65.
How about Dino Don?
Anyone who was out on the
circuit.
East Coast, it raced mostly in the New England area, a New England drag strip, a Costco, all those strips out that way, and it did race Jenkins and Dino Don and Landy and Sox. And
Dandy Dick Landy, was that the Color Be Gone Dodge?
no, that was Roger Linneman.
That was Roger Lindemann. Yeah. Boy, maybe you are as old as me.
No, well, I don't know.
I'm 71, so.
63.
See, you're about 10 years younger.
Yeah.
Anyhow, is there anything I've missed?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I'll tell you something. It's a drop-dead gorgeous car. It really is. Now, can I put your wife to work for us? I assume
You
wife. I'm
certainly
sorry.
can.
I put you to work for a moment?
Sure. Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
What you are looking at is an example of my first car. I should say it's almost an example of my first car. Everything is the same, 1953 Cadillac, except mine was a 4-door and this one's a 2-door, but everything else is identical. And watch, I'm going to know something about the car that he won't believe. The left rear taillight, you push the reflector button on it, and what do you find underneath it?
Gas tank.
You're exactly right.
Yes,
That's
sir.
where the gas filler neck is. First, tell the folks who you are.
My name is Jim Conroy,
And where are you from, Jim?
Elk Grove Village, Illinois.
Tell me about your car.
It's a 1953 Coupe de Ville
Cadillac.
Cadillac, yes. I bought it in 95. I got it in boxes. It was all taken apart, and me and my best buddy put it together.
Oh, so you actually had to work on a car.
Oh, yes, yeah. When we bought it, all it was done, it was painted, but it was painted poorly. They never pulled any of the stainless off around the windows and all that, the belt line. So we took it all down, did it completely.
Now, 331 engine?
Yes, but it was 40 over, so it's actually like a 351 now.
Okay.
Yeah,
I bet you don't run into many people that often that know what size engine a 53 Cadillac had.
Not that often, no. And that motor was what, all the way up till 56, if
I
I'm
was
not
going to say
mistaken.
55 or 56.
56,
yeah,
yes, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And the in fact, that was a big deal because in 1949, Olds came out with the overhead valve V8 and Cadillac came out with the overhead valve V8.
Exactly.
But Olds's was 303 cubic inches and
Oh,
the
really?
Cadillac was 331.
Oh, okay, yes.
So Cadillac had the bigger engine. Do you have a 4-speed Hydromatic in it?
Yes, I do, yep.
Okay, so all original?
All original,
Now
yes.
I've got to ask you the most important question. Do your windows go up?
They go up and down. They're power windows. They're
Well,
hydraulic.
I know they're power windows, but I also know that they're hydraulic.
Of
The
course,
reason
the
I know
closing comment I referred to earlier was to encourage you to attend some of the local summer car shows that are still to come. Whether Motorsports Unlimited is there or not isn't important, but it is important that you are there. Take it from someone who has pretty much missed the whole summer 2015 summer car show season. You really appreciate them when you can't attend. Now, I'm asking the cable operators to play this show for a few weeks, so if you didn't catch it from the beginning, you can try to catch a future airing. I hope I've explained it clearly. If not, email me with questions. Thanks for your patience.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grant Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com or email us directly at msutv@aol.com. We enjoy hearing from our audience and encourage you to let us know what you think.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye. And keep on rocking.